Hey everyone! Tonight, a queen is in labor, and 70 people are waiting for permission to enter her room. It is the morning of the 10th of June, 1688, at St. James's Palace in London. The Queen is Mary of Modena, wife of King James II. She has lost child after child, and now, at the age of 29, she is about to give birth again. This time, the child may survive. This time, the child may be a boy. And if he is, he will push the king's Protestant daughters aside and become heir to the thrones of England, Scotland, and Ireland. A Catholic dynasty that many subjects believed would end with James may continue into another generation. So the chamber does not belong to the woman giving birth. The king is there. The Queen Dowager is there. Senior officers of state, members of the Privy Council, titled ladies, servants, medical attendants, and courtiers crowd close. Some have hurried across the city after receiving word that labor has begun. More than 70 people will later be counted among those present in or around the royal birth. The air is hot. The room is noisy. Mary asks how she can endure such an ordeal with so many men watching. According to a later account, James covers part of her face with his wig so that she cannot see them. It is a strangely small gesture of privacy in a chamber arranged to deny her almost all of it. Then the baby arrives. He is alive. He is male. The king makes sure witnesses follow as the infant is carried away to be washed and swaddled. Every movement matters because the people in the palace understand what enemies will say if the sequence is unclear. They will say the queen was never pregnant. They will say her real child was stillborn. They will say another baby was smuggled into the chamber inside a warming pan used to heat the royal bed. More than 70 witnesses are present, yet the rumor spreads anyway. 4 months later, 42 of them will give formal testimony before the Privy Council. Their statements will be printed and circulated. The king will insist that scarcely any prince has ever been born before so many people. It will not save his throne. Why did a queen need an audience while giving birth? Who were those 70 people, and what could they genuinely see? Why did the public believe a story about a baby hidden in a metal bed warmer when so many courtiers swore that the birth was real? And how did one crowded chamber help push a kingdom toward revolution? Tonight, we will enter the royal lying-in room, examine the rituals designed to protect an heir's legitimacy, and follow the warming pan scandal from whispered suspicion to political weapon. We will also travel to other royal birth chambers, where queens fainted beneath the gaze of crowds and government ministers continued witnessing births into the 20th century. Before we begin, you can subscribe if you enjoy quiet journeys through the private moments that changed public history. Then settle in. Let the room around you become calm, and imagine a palace where the arrival of one infant matters so much that a queen cannot be allowed to give birth alone. The number 70 needs one immediate clarification. It does not mean 70 random people purchased tickets and formed a neat circle around the bed with an equal view of the birth. The group included important men and women of court and government, along with attendants whose work brought them into the chamber. Some stood close. Others occupied different parts of a crowded suite. Sightlines varied. A person officially present might witness the queen in labor, hear the birth announced, see the newborn moments later, or follow the child into another room without watching every physical detail. To Mary, however, many were people she would never have chosen for such an intimate moment. Their ranks did not make the room feel private. Royal birth customs developed from a simple political problem. Hereditary monarchy depended upon bodies, but bodies are private and uncertain. A king could publicly acknowledge a child, yet enemies might question whether that infant had truly been born to his wife. A queen could labor behind closed doors, yet secrecy created space for rumors of substitution. The solution was witness. The queen's pregnancy was observed over months. Her confinement followed ceremony. Trusted women attended her closely. Senior figures were summoned when labor began. The child was seen immediately and carried through an organized sequence. Announcements, prayers, bells, and printed notices transformed a biological event into public fact. A chain of observers connected womb to throne. The same logic had surrounded the royal wedding bed. Witnesses confirmed that a marriage had entered the chamber. Birth witnesses confirmed that the expected child had emerged from the queen. Baptism and presentation added further layers. Dynastic legitimacy was built from ceremonies placed around moments no state could completely control. For an ordinary woman in 17th-century England, childbirth was usually a female-centered event. When labor began, neighbors, female relatives, servants, a midwife, and chosen companions gathered. Men often remained outside unless a medical crisis brought a male physician or surgeon. The birthing room was warm, enclosed, and familiar. Women offered practical help: prayer, food, drink, massage, cloth, and knowledge accumulated through experience. The mother might move, kneel, stand, sit on a birthing stool, or labor in bed. There was no one universal position. Midwives adjusted to circumstance. Household objects became supports. Linen was prepared. Water was heated. The room contained hope, fear, work, and the voices of women who had survived the ordeal themselves. The period after delivery, known as lying in, gave the mother time to recover before returning fully to public and religious life. Visitors came, food and gifts arrived. The household protected the room according to local custom and means. Royal confinement magnified these practices through ceremony. Before labor, a queen withdrew from ordinary court life into a prepared suite. In earlier Tudor tradition, the chamber might be darkened and enclosed, with windows covered and walls hung in rich fabric. Male presence was restricted. Religious images and objects were selected. The atmosphere symbolically returned the mother to a protected, womb-like space. Yet the final need for political witnesses pushed against seclusion. The queen was supposed to be hidden and observed at the same time. Her body was sacred, modest, dynastic, and public. The contradiction could never be resolved comfortably. Childbirth itself was dangerous at every social level. Hemorrhage, infection, obstructed labor, convulsions, retained placenta, and exhaustion could kill without warning. Babies died from prematurity, trauma, infection, and conditions no attendant could treat. A woman who had given birth before without trouble was not guaranteed safety the next time. Royal wealth improved food, comfort, and access to attendants, but could not remove the danger. It could even add risk through ceremony. A crowded, overheated room reduced air and movement. Court etiquette delayed decisions. Rival practitioners argued. Political demand placed stress on the mother. The need for an audience served legitimacy, not medicine. Mary of Modena knew loss intimately. She was born Maria Beatrice d'Este in 1658, a princess of the small but prestigious Italian duchy of Modena. Her father died while she was young. She received an excellent education and grew up within a devout Catholic environment. As a girl, Mary reportedly hoped for religious life rather than marriage. European diplomacy had another plan. James, Duke of York, younger brother of King Charles II, needed a second wife after the death of Anne Hyde. He was almost 25 years older than Mary and already had two surviving daughters, Mary and Anne. His Catholic faith made any marriage politically sensitive in Protestant England. Mary was 15 when a proxy marriage joined her to James in 1673. The match provoked hostility before she reached her new country. Parliament and public opinion feared Catholic influence. Mary arrived young, foreign, devout, and connected to a husband whose religion would dominate the politics of his future reign. Her first pregnancies did not create the lasting Catholic heir opponents feared. Children were stillborn or died in infancy and early childhood. A daughter named Isabella lived for several years, but she too died. A son named Charles survived only weeks. Other pregnancies ended without a living child. Each confinement opened hope and closed in mourning. The list looks clinical on a page. For Mary, it was repeated physical and emotional loss. She endured pregnancy, labor, recovery, and grief, while courtiers measured dynastic consequence. Every infant received a title and funeral appropriate to rank, but rank could not keep the child breathing. By the time James became king in 1685, many people expected his succession problem to solve itself. He had no surviving son with Mary. His daughters from his first marriage were Protestant. The elder, Mary, was married to William of Orange, a Protestant ruler in the Dutch Republic. The younger, Anne, was also Protestant and married to Prince George of Denmark. James was already in his 50s. If he died without a son, the crown would pass to a Protestant daughter. Many English political figures disliked his Catholic policies, but believed they could tolerate a temporary reign while waiting for succession. Then Mary became pregnant late in 1687. The balance changed immediately. If the baby were a girl, the existing order would remain largely intact. If it were a boy, he would take precedence over older sisters under the rules of male preference succession. Raised by Catholic parents, the child promised not a temporary Catholic monarch, but a continuing Catholic line. Opponents responded before the baby was born. Rumors claimed the pregnancy was false. Some said Mary's abdomen changed suspiciously. Others interpreted ordinary variations in public appearance as proof. Past losses made malicious speculation easier. Perhaps she could not carry a healthy child, so the court must be planning a substitute. No evidence was needed to begin. Suspicion had found a politically useful shape. England's fear of Catholic conspiracy had been intensified by decades of conflict. The civil wars, execution of Charles I, Republican interregnum, and restoration of Charles II remained within living memory. Religion and monarchy had already torn kingdoms apart. In the late 1670s, the fabricated popish plot claimed Catholics planned to assassinate Charles II. False testimony helped send innocent people to execution. The panic eventually collapsed, but it left deep habits of belief. A story about secret priests, hidden heirs, and Catholic deception entered a public imagination already trained to expect plots. James did little to calm that fear. As king, he appointed Catholics to military and public positions, challenged legal restrictions, and attempted to reshape religious policy through royal power. Supporters could describe his declaration of indulgence as toleration. Opponents saw an authoritarian attempt to establish Catholic influence. His standing army alarmed subjects who associated permanent troops with foreign tyranny. Across the Channel, Louis XIV had revoked protections for French Protestants in 1685, sending refugees and stories of persecution into Protestant Europe. Every action entered a larger narrative. When 7 bishops petitioned against James's religious policy and were prosecuted for seditious libel, their trial became a national confrontation. Their acquittal in June 1688 produced celebrations. The Queen's labor began within days of that crisis. The birth of a Catholic prince was not simply family news. It appeared to confirm the worst fears of people already turning against the king. That is why St. James's Palace filled with witnesses. James needed a birth no opponent could deny. He was about to discover that political belief can survive the evidence designed to destroy it. Mary had expected the birth later in the summer. This mattered because the court was not assembled exactly as James might have chosen for a public test. His daughter Anne was away at Bath. His elder daughter Mary lived in the Netherlands. Several important Protestant figures whose presence might have carried special credibility were absent. Labor does not wait for political convenience. When Mary's pains began at St. James's Palace, messages went out. The king wanted senior people summoned quickly. Some arrived before the birth. Others came too late or encountered confusion. A royal household could move with impressive ceremony when an event followed schedule, but childbirth followed its own clock. The Queen's chamber filled. The Queen Dowager, Catherine of Braganza, widow of Charles II, was present. Members of the Privy Council attended. High-ranking ladies stood near the bed. Officers and servants moved through adjoining rooms. Medical and birth attendants performed their duties, while powerful men attempted to make themselves useful by witnessing. The London Gazette announced that between 9 and 10 in the morning, the Queen had been safely delivered of a prince at St. James's with the King, Queen Dowager, most of the lords of the Privy Council, and various ladies of quality present. The announcement offered exactly the official facts the monarchy required: time, place, sex, maternal safety, named categories of witness. The newborn was James Francis Edward Stuart. He would later be known by supporters as King James III and VIII, and by opponents as the Old Pretender. But on that morning, he was simply a baby whose first cries reorganized the succession. The witnesses watched the next stages carefully. The infant was carried from the immediate birth room to be cleaned, wrapped, and presented according to court practice. The king encouraged people to follow. Separation between mother and child created the precise moment in which a substitution rumor could grow, so continuity of observation mattered. A wet nurse and attendants would care for the baby. Clergy and officials prepared Thanksgiving, baptismal, and proclamation rituals. News moved beyond the palace through bells, printed notices, conversation, and deliberate celebration. Catholic supporters rejoiced. Opponents began editing the mourning into a conspiracy. The object at the center of their story was a warming pan. A 17th-century bed warmer was usually a covered metal pan attached to a long handle. A servant placed hot coals or embers inside and moved the pan between cold sheets before someone retired. Used carefully, it reduced the shock of an unheated bed. Used carelessly, it could scorch linen or start a fire. The object belonged naturally near a royal bedchamber. That made it ideal for rumor. According to the accusation, a living baby had been hidden inside or brought into the room with a warming pan, replacing a stillborn child or creating an entirely false birth. Prints and pamphlets turned the pan into a recognizable symbol. The story compressed a complicated political claim into one absurd but vivid image. Could a newborn actually be carried among hot coals in an ordinary closed warming pan? Not plausibly in the literal way many cartoons suggested. Rumor did not need engineering. The term named a container and a moment of concealed entry. Retellings varied. Perhaps the pan was empty and hid the baby. Perhaps bedclothes concealed it. Perhaps a servant carried a substitute through a secret route. Contradictions made the story flexible rather than weak. Every denial generated another version. If witnesses saw the Queen labor, conspirators could say her pains were acted. If witnesses saw a baby emerge or appear immediately, conspirators could say it was dead and replaced afterward. If people followed the baby, conspirators could say the switch occurred before they looked. If 70 people were present, conspirators could say the crowd itself created confusion. The rumor adjusted to survive. Some opponents had begun with the conclusion that a healthy Catholic heir could not be genuine. Evidence was interpreted inside that belief. The unusual number of witnesses did not reassure them, because most witnesses were connected to the king. Catholic, foreign, dependent upon court, or otherwise untrustworthy in Protestant eyes. The very attempt to prove legitimacy looked like evidence that proof was needed. James had also failed to ensure the presence of the people most likely to persuade skeptics. Princess Anne's absence became important. She had expressed doubts about her stepmother's pregnancy and later accepted or encouraged the substitution story. Her elder sister Mary, whose place in the succession had now changed, received reports from England while living with William. Their suspicions carried dynastic interest. If the child were genuine, Mary and Anne moved behind him. If he were an impostor, their rights had been stolen. The warming pan was therefore not only a Protestant fear. It was a story that restored two Protestant princesses to the expected future. Mary of Modena's own experience almost disappeared beneath the argument. She had endured months of scrutiny, a crowded labor, and the physical strain of birth after repeated losses. Instead of being allowed to recover quietly, she became the supposed actress at the center of a national fraud. Her surviving son was called counterfeit. The more she insisted upon truth, the more enemies treated insistence as performance. The child's body also became public property. People examined his health, resemblance, size, and behavior for political clues. Did he look like the king? Did the queen nurse him? Was he the correct age? Every normal variation could support a theory. Resemblance is unreliable evidence, especially in a newborn. But faces have always attracted dynastic interpretation. Portraits emphasized family features, Courtiers praised a royal nose or eyes. Enemies saw difference. The king responded through formal testimony. On the 22nd of October, 1688, a meeting of the Privy Council heard witnesses to the birth. 42 people gave depositions or confirmed accounts of what they had observed. The proceedings were published to counter what James described as malicious reports. Witnesses included titled men and women, officers, attendants, and people whose positions brought them near the Queen. They described being summoned, seeing Mary in labor, hearing her cries, observing preparations, watching the child born or seeing him immediately afterward, and following events through the palace. No one witness saw every instant from every angle. Together, their statements created a chain. The Queen was visibly pregnant. She labored. A child was born. The child was male and alive. The baby remained under observation as attendants carried him. The king hoped accumulation would create certainty. If one testimony could be dismissed, 42 would be harder. If the printed record reached the public, it might outrun rumor. It did not. Print favored the memorable. A long set of depositions required patience. A warming pan required one picture. Pamphlets, engravings, songs, poems, and conversation turned the alleged substitution into political shorthand. The baby could be called supposititious, spurious, or pretended. The accusation traveled among people who would never read the official witness statements. The scandal demonstrates an early form of information war. The court supplied documentation. Opponents supplied narrative. Narrative won attention. This does not mean everyone believed the rumor literally. Some repeated it because it mocked the king. Others treated it as possible. Political coalitions do not require every participant to share the same level of belief. A useful story can unite sincere fear, cynical propaganda, and casual amusement. The timing was disastrous for James. His prosecution of the 7 bishops had alienated many Anglicans. The birth removed hope that succession would soon reverse his religious policy. Military officers and political elites questioned whether the king respected established law. William of Orange watched events from across the Channel. Later in June, 7 English figures sent William a secret invitation to intervene. They claimed broad support and referred to the dangers facing Protestant religion and liberties. The prince's birth intensified urgency, though it was not the only cause. William's decision involved strategy as well as religion. He wanted English resources in the European struggle against Louis XIV of France. A friendly English government would strengthen resistance to French power. James's alignment and domestic weakness created opportunity. When William landed with a Dutch-led force in November 1688, the monarchy collapsed with surprising speed. Important officers deserted. Nobles changed sides. Princess Anne left her father's court. Her husband, Prince George of Denmark, defected to William. James reportedly reacted to each abandonment with despair. The king attempted to flee, was briefly intercepted, and eventually reached France. Mary of Modena escaped with the infant first, traveling in disguise and under dangerous conditions. The baby, accused of entering a palace hidden in a warming pan, left the kingdom concealed in his mother's flight. James's enemies declared that he had abdicated by fleeing. William and Mary accepted the crowns jointly in 1689. New constitutional arrangements limited royal power and confirmed a Protestant political settlement. James attempted recovery, most notably through Ireland, but was defeated. The child born before 70 witnesses never inherited the British thrones. He grew up in exile at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, under the protection of Louis XIV. After James II died, Jacobites recognized the son as the rightful king. Attempts to restore him failed, and later his own son, Charles Edward Stuart, would lead the rising of 1745. The warming pan story followed the family. Opponents used it to deny James Francis Edward not only political right but biological identity. The label Old Pretender implied false claim, while Jacobites called him king. The disagreement over one morning became hereditary. Modern historians overwhelmingly accept that Mary gave birth to her own son. The pregnancy was observed. The birth had numerous witnesses. The substitution stories conflict and arose from intense political prejudice. No credible evidence demonstrates that a baby entered in a warming pan, yet the myth still appears because it tells a dramatic story about secrecy and power. A real baby, a crowded room, and a political revolution are more complicated than a hidden infant in a metal pan. The irony is severe. The monarchy exposed Mary to an audience in order to prevent doubt. The audience could not prevent it. Visibility did not create trust because trust had already collapsed. This is the deeper answer to why 70 witnesses were not enough. People do not assess evidence in an empty room. They bring religion, fear, loyalty, self-interest, memory, and expectation. If the witness belongs to a distrusted system, more witnesses from that system may only look like a larger conspiracy. James tried to solve a political problem as though it were a courtroom problem. He thought testimony could establish the fact of birth. It could establish the fact for a fair listener. It could not make his opponents want the consequence to be true. The political failure should not make us underestimate the care devoted to the birth itself. A royal confinement required months of planning. Rooms were chosen and furnished. Linen, swaddling cloth, beds, cradles, basins, warming equipment, medicines, food, candles, and devotional objects were prepared. Midwives and attendants arranged their availability. Messengers knew whom to summon. The Queen's household became a temporary government of the body. At its center stood the midwife. Midwives were not simply untrained neighbors guessing in darkness. Knowledge varied, but experienced practitioners could attend hundreds of births and possess sophisticated manual skill. They recognized stages of labor, supported different positions, managed the cord and placenta, revived some infants, and knew when danger exceeded their ability. Their knowledge was practical and embodied. They worked without anesthesia, antisepsis, blood transfusion, antibiotics, safe cesarean surgery, or reliable instruments. Success depended upon the mother's health, the baby's position, luck, and judgment within severe limits. At court, a midwife's reputation carried political weight. She had to be trusted not only to deliver a child, but to identify it. She might be required to swear that no substitution occurred. Her hands encountered the fact more directly than most counselors in the room, yet male officials often held greater authority when testimony entered politics. Female attendants formed another ring. Ladies helped the queen change position, wiped sweat, held cloth, offered drink, spoke reassurance, and watched the midwife. Some were present by office, others by intimacy or rank. Their ability to observe closely made them important witnesses later. Servants carried the material world. Water had to arrive hot. Used linen had to be removed. Fires were maintained. Messages moved through doors. The chamber could not function without people whose names appeared less often in official accounts. Male physicians and surgeons increasingly entered elite childbirth in early modern Europe, especially when danger was expected. Their formal learning did not necessarily make them more effective than an experienced midwife. Medical theories could mislead, and intervention carried risk. Court competition between practitioners added tension. Then came the political men. Privy councillors did not know how to assist labor. Their purpose was presence. They represented offices, institutions, and factions whose recognition might secure the succession. A great lord could later say that he had been in the palace and seen the infant before any plausible substitution. The room therefore contained several kinds of witness. The midwife witnessed through touch. The ladies witnessed through intimate proximity. The physicians witnessed through professional claim. The counselors witnessed through authority. The servants witnessed through continuity of movement. The king witnessed through paternity and command. The queen was both participant and evidence. Her pain became proof. This was perhaps the cruelest part of the system. To establish that the child was legitimate, observers needed confidence that she had truly labored. Signs of suffering were politically useful. Privacy could look suspicious. Mary's losses intensified the demand. Because earlier children had died, opponents considered the sudden arrival of a healthy son improbable. In reality, repeated infant death was tragically common, and a woman could certainly bear a surviving child after miscarriages, stillbirths, or early deaths. Probability became prejudice when filtered through religion. The queen's pregnancy was monitored. Court observers noted her size, movements, appetite, health, and schedule. Women who attended her could feel or see evidence unavailable to the public. But rumors converted the very privacy required by modesty into concealment. To disprove a false pregnancy completely, critics demanded exposure. Exposure then became another reason for criticism. No arrangement could satisfy people committed to doubt. This pattern recurred in royal history whenever succession was uncertain. A queen who conceived too quickly faced accusations of premarital relations. One who conceived too slowly was called barren. A daughter disappointed the court. A son attracted claims of substitution. A resemblance to the father proved legitimacy to supporters and proved nothing to opponents. The queen carried a political standard nobody could meet consistently. Ordinary women experienced surveillance too, though without kingdoms attached. Families watched pregnancy timing to judge sexual conduct. Communities remembered whether a child arrived suspiciously soon after marriage. Midwives could be asked to identify signs of birth in legal cases involving concealed pregnancy or infanticide. But royalty multiplied every gaze. The birth chamber became a state archive before anyone wrote a document. Each person stored a memory. Later, the Privy Council attempted to collect those memories into a defensible record. Questions converted sensations into statements. Witnesses recalled where they stood, whom they saw, and when the baby appeared. Clerks standardized language. Signatures transformed experience into evidence. The resulting publication served as an official certificate made from bodies. Today, a birth is registered through medical records, forms, named parents, dates, and civil administration. Hospitals control infant identification through bands, secure wards, electronic systems, and documented handovers. DNA testing can resolve biological relationships with a precision unimaginable in 1688. The Stuart court had people. 70 people were a human security system. The system failed not because the birth was false, but because authentication requires social trust. A certificate is useful only if people trust the authority issuing it. A witness is useful only if listeners consider the witness independent and honest. James's witnesses were impressive in rank, but weak in perceived independence. Critics asked why Anne was absent. Why were more outspoken Protestants not summoned sooner? Why had the baby moved between rooms? Why was the labor earlier than expected? Why were some doors opened or closed? Every practical event became suspicious because the king had lost credibility in other matters. This offers a lesson about propaganda. The best false story attaches itself to a real gap. Anne truly was absent. The baby truly moved through the palace. A warming pan truly belonged near a bed. The birth truly occurred at a politically decisive moment. The rumor joined these facts with an invented conclusion. Its physical detail made it easy to visualize. Listeners could imagine a servant carrying a long-handled pan beneath blankets. The image entered prints where the supposed conspiracy required no lengthy explanation. The official case was stronger but less entertaining. The queen was pregnant. Many people saw her labor. The midwife delivered a child. Witnesses observed continuity. The child grew to resemble his family and lived into adulthood. Truth had no surprising twist. The lie did. This imbalance appears throughout history. A scandal can cross a tavern in one sentence. A correction arrives with 42 depositions. By October, James's effort to publish testimony was already too late. William's preparations were advancing. English elites had made decisions for reasons larger than one baby. The birth scandal gave moral color to an invasion presented as defense of religion and liberty. When William issued a declaration explaining his intervention, doubts about the prince's legitimacy appeared within a broader list of grievances. The warming pan helped represent James's government as fraudulent at its most intimate point. If the king could counterfeit an heir, what law would he respect? This rhetorical question was powerful even without evidence. James's supporters faced an impossible task. To defend the baby, they had to repeat the accusation. Every official denial reminded readers of the pan. Mary and her son lived with the result for decades. In exile, the former queen maintained a court shaped by loss and Jacobite hope. Supporters treated her with sympathy and respect. Louis XIV recognized the family's royal status and provided Saint-Germain as a residence. James Francis Edward grew into a serious, reserved man, educated for a throne he had never known. Jacobite supporters across Britain and Europe remained loyal. He attempted to recover power in 1715, but the rising failed. Later plans also collapsed. His identity depended upon which history a person accepted. To a Jacobite, he was the rightful son and king, excluded for his faith. To a committed opponent, he was a pretender whose birth itself could be mocked. To modern history, he was unquestionably the son of Mary of Modena and James II, but his claim was defeated by political settlement. The 70 witnesses were right about the biological fact. They were powerless over the constitutional outcome. This distinction matters because the Glorious Revolution was not simply a response to a false rumor. James had alienated powerful groups through religious policy, use of prerogative, military appointments, and confrontation with institutions. William brought an army and international strategy. Desertions, negotiation, and political calculation determined the collapse. The baby accelerated the crisis. He did not create it alone. History sometimes turns the warming pan into the cause of a revolution because one object is easier to remember than years of policy. The real relationship is subtler. The birth removed the expectation of a near Protestant succession, and the rumor made resistance easier to justify. A bed warmer became a symbol for a political future many refused to accept. The royal birth chamber was therefore not only a site of medical risk, it was a place where competing futures entered at once. Mary saw a long-awaited living son. James saw dynastic continuity. Catholics saw hope. Protestant opponents saw prolonged danger. Princesses Mary and Anne saw displacement. William saw a strategic change. The midwife saw a woman and infant requiring care. The witnesses saw evidence. The public saw whichever story matched its fear. All of them looked toward the same cradle and saw something different. That is why the room had to be so crowded, and that is why crowding it could never be enough. England was not alone in treating royal birth as public evidence. Across European monarchies, succession created similar anxieties. Courts developed different mixtures of seclusion, witness, ritual, and announcement. The details changed, but the central problem remained. An infant who might one day rule had to be accepted as authentic from the first breath. France carried the public principle to an extraordinary degree. At Versailles, the Queen's state bedchamber was not merely a private bedroom. It belonged to a ceremonial route through which courtiers observed royal life. The king's waking and retiring could be organized performances. A queen gave birth within a culture where access to the monarch's body expressed rank and political closeness. The birth of Marie Antoinette's first child in December 1778 became a notorious example. She had been married to Louis XVI for 8 years without producing a child. When labor began, the event attracted intense attention. Court custom opened access far beyond a small group of medical attendants. News traveled through the palace, and people hurried toward the Queen's apartment. The chamber filled alarmingly. Princes, princesses, officers, ladies, courtiers, and people who gained entry crowded near. Later accounts speak of around 200 spectators, though exact numbers in dramatic court stories should always be treated with care. What is certain is that the room became dangerously packed. Winter windows were closed. Fires, candles, heavy clothing, and many bodies heated the air. The Queen labored for hours with limited ventilation. When the baby was born, attention shifted toward the infant and the disappointing news that the child was a girl rather than the hoped-for male heir. Marie Antoinette collapsed. She fainted or suffered a convulsive episode in the overheated chamber. Windows had to be opened or broken to bring fresh air. The king and attendants cleared space. For a frightening period, those close to her feared she might die. She recovered. Her daughter, Marie-Thérèse Charlotte, survived and became known as Madame Royale. But the experience demonstrated that a ritual designed to secure the dynasty could endanger the person producing it. Louis altered the practice for later births. Access was restricted to a smaller circle of necessary or trusted witnesses. Legitimacy still mattered, but the court no longer needed to recreate the same crush. The change did not make Marie Antoinette's body private by modern standards. Her pregnancies, births, children, appearance, and marriage remained subjects of public judgment. The first years without a child had produced cruel speculation about her relationship with Louis. Later, political pornography accused her of endless sexual misconduct. As revolution approached, attacks upon the Queen's body became attacks upon monarchy itself. Mary of Modena and Marie Antoinette lived in different kingdoms and centuries, but both discovered that royal motherhood offered no safe amount of visibility. Too little created rumors. Too much created danger. Witnessed childbirth survived in more restrained British form. Rather than inviting an entire political class into the room, the monarchy came to rely upon selected senior officials. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, a government minister, usually the Home Secretary, could be required to attend the royal residence when a birth affected the succession. He did not necessarily stand beside the bed watching the physical delivery. His presence in the building authenticated the event on behalf of government. The official could observe arrangements, receive immediate confirmation, and ensure there was no opportunity for substitution. Bureaucratic witness replaced the mass of courtiers. The custom still reveals distrust. Royal parents could not simply announce, "We have a child." The state wanted a representative nearby. When the future Edward VIII was born in 1894, the presence of the Home Secretary and other dignitaries reflected this older requirement. Queen Victoria later accepted that fewer officials were sufficient. The ceremony narrowed but did not vanish immediately. The final occasion on which a British Home Secretary attended a royal birth came in 1936, at the birth of Princess Alexandra, a cousin of the future Queen Elizabeth II. Sir John Simon was present at the residence in his official capacity. By then, medicine, registration, communication, and public expectations had changed. The idea that a government minister needed to verify a royal baby increasingly looked like an antique intrusion. The practice ended. Modern royal births are announced through doctors, family, and official communications without a cabinet minister waiting outside the delivery room. The journey from 70 witnesses to none was gradual. It followed changes in monarchy itself. Political power shifted toward parliament and government. Succession remained important, but royal bodies no longer determined every aspect of national administration in the same direct way. Civil registration created standard evidence. Professional medicine documented labor and infant identity. Newspapers and photography provided new forms of public confirmation. Privacy also became a stronger cultural claim. Bedrooms and hospitals developed firmer boundaries. Childbirth moved, unevenly and controversially, from female domestic space toward medical institutions. The number of attendants might increase again, but they entered as professionals rather than political spectators. This medical shift brought benefits and harms. Male physicians gained authority over midwives in elite birth before medical practice could reliably improve many outcomes. Instruments such as forceps offered life-saving possibilities in obstructed labor, but secrecy, poor training, and aggressive use could injure. Hospitals concentrated expertise but also infection before antisepsis was understood. By the 19th and 20th centuries, anesthesia, antiseptic practice, surgery, blood transfusion, antibiotics, monitoring, and neonatal care transformed survival. Progress did not arrive all at once or reach everyone equally. The fundamental purpose of witnesses changed with it. In a modern delivery room, the people present are there primarily for care and emotional support. A partner, relative, doula, midwife, nurse, obstetrician, anesthetist, or pediatric team may enter according to need and preference. Their presence can also authenticate records, but that is not why a crowd gathers. The mother, ideally, has a voice in who remains. Mary of Modena did not. Her discomfort was subordinate to succession. The distinction between a care team and a political audience is central. Both may include many people, but power runs differently. One group should serve the patient. The other required the patient to serve the state. Royal women understood that duty from childhood. Princesses were educated as potential diplomatic brides. Their marriages linked territories. Their fertility was assessed. Portraits traveled ahead to prospective husbands. Menstruation, health, and body shape could be reported through ambassadors. After marriage, every month without pregnancy attracted observation. A queen's primary dynastic task was described bluntly: produce heirs. Her success depended upon chance and biology she could not control. She could not choose the child's sex. She could not guarantee conception. She could not prevent miscarriage. She could not protect an infant from every disease. Yet praise and blame treated outcomes as personal achievement or failure. Mary's history of loss did not reduce pressure. It increased it. By 1688, the court had waited years for a surviving son. Her healthy baby appeared almost too perfectly timed to skeptics. The same outcome that fulfilled her role became proof of conspiracy in their minds. We can feel compassion for Mary without endorsing James's politics. Historical people are not moral packages. James could pursue policies that alienated subjects while his wife genuinely endured a slander about her child. Protestant fear could arise from real political conflict, while the warming pan story remained false. William's invasion could have strategic and constitutional causes, while propaganda exploited prejudice. The birth chamber forces these complexities together. It asks us to hold fact and consequence separately. Fact: Mary gave birth to a son. Consequence: his birth changed the succession and accelerated resistance. Claim: he was smuggled into the room. Evidence: the claim was unsupported and contradicted by many witnesses. Outcome: the unsupported claim remained politically effective. The number 70 is therefore not only shocking because of lost privacy, it is shocking because of failure. If 70 people cannot establish a fact, what could? The answer is trust, not merely sight. Witnessing works within a shared system. A court accepts testimony because judge, procedure, oath, and witness carry legitimacy. A society accepts a birth certificate because it trusts hospitals and civil registration enough for ordinary use. If every institution is assumed corrupt, no number of documents can close suspicion. In 1688, James's opponents distrusted the court producing the witnesses. They saw Catholics protecting a Catholic succession. They saw dependents obeying a king. They saw foreign women in the Queen's household. Even Protestant witnesses could be dismissed as confused or intimidated. Conspiracy swallowed contradiction. For James, summoning more people seemed rational. For Mary, each additional person increased humiliation. For the opposition, each additional person expanded the alleged plot. The same act produced proof, pain, and suspicion at once. That is the tragic geometry of the room. The bed stands at the center. Medical attendants form the first circle. Ladies and servants form the next. Counselors and officers press behind them, beyond the door. Messengers wait. Beyond the palace, London waits. Beyond London, kingdoms wait. Beyond the sea, William waits. One woman labors beneath the weight of all those circles. No wonder she asks how she can bear it. The question also invites us to examine the word stranger. Mary recognized many faces in the chamber. She had lived at the English court for 15 years. She knew the Queen Dowager, ladies, officers, and senior counselors. Some attendants had served her through previous pregnancies. They were not strangers in the literal sense, but familiarity is not intimacy. A person can know a minister for years and still not want him present during childbirth. Court acquaintance did not transform political officials into chosen companions. To the Queen's body, rank offered no comfort. The title's 70 strangers therefore captures emotional distance more than formal introduction. Most were there because of what Mary represented, not because of what she needed. The people she needed most worked closest: midwife, women attendants, servants, and medical practitioners. The people the state believed it needed stood behind them. When all gathered in one suite, purpose became difficult to separate. Space mattered. St. James's Palace was a royal complex of connected rooms, passages, stairs, courtyards, and guarded entrances. A bedchamber belonged within a sequence of access. Not every person counted as present stood with a direct view between the Queen's knees. Some occupied the bedchamber, others nearby rooms or doorways, moving as the child was carried. This makes the event no less intrusive, but more plausible. 70 bodies can overwhelm an ordinary chamber. Distributed through a royal suite, they create a chain of observation. Witnesses closer to the bed certify birth. Those farther away certify that no hidden infant passed through their section. The king's attention to movement reflects the allegation he feared. Doors are the weak points in any chain. Who entered? Who left? What did they carry? Was a warming pan brought before labor? Were bedclothes moved? Did a servant pass through an unobserved corridor? Later testimony answered such questions in detail because rumors focused upon logistics. A warming pan itself was not suspicious. June weather could still be cool, and bed warmers belonged to well-equipped chambers. The object became suspicious retroactively. Once pamphleteers named it, every normal service action involving bedding acquired sinister meaning. The pan's design encouraged visual satire. Its round-covered body could be drawn like a container for an infant. Its long handle made it theatrical. Artists could place a tiny face beneath the lid, carry it toward a bed, and surround it with priests or conspirators. Viewers understood the accusation before reading words. Official testimony had no equally vivid object. Its symbol was the crowd, but crowds can be drawn as conspirators too. The monarchy attempted another visual strategy through public presentation of the prince. The baby was baptized, given titles, shown to courtiers, and included in royal imagery. A visible growing child ought to normalize his place. Instead, opponents called him the pretended Prince of Wales. Language did the work of exclusion. Pretended suggested both false birth and false title. Pretender later acquired a specialized political meaning for a claimant considered illegitimate by the ruling settlement. The word followed James Francis Edward long after no one could imagine him fitting inside a pan. As he grew, bodily resemblance offered supporters reassurance. Reports noted features associated with the Stuarts or with James. Such observations were emotionally satisfying but unnecessary. The witness evidence already established maternity. The search for resemblance reveals how scandal keeps demanding new proof. No proof remains final. Conspiracy theory is a room whose doors move each time someone closes one. This helps explain why the October depositions failed. The witnesses spoke within a political atmosphere that had already moved from uncertainty to action. Their testimony was not evaluated only for truth. It was evaluated for usefulness. William's supporters benefited from doubt. James's supporters benefited from certainty. Readers selected accordingly. The printed statements still matter to historians because they preserve perspectives and details. They show how seriously the king took the accusation. They demonstrate the number and rank of people available to testify. They reveal the early modern state attempting to use publication as authentication. Printing had transformed political conflict. Pamphlets could circulate arguments beyond court. Coffee houses, taverns, bookshops, streets, and private homes became places where people discussed royal policy. News traveled through manuscript letters, printed gazettes, sermons, songs, and conversation. Censorship existed, but control was incomplete. The king could command a chamber. He could not command every story leaving it. The birth scandal belongs to this expanding public sphere. Private bodily detail became political content for readers who had never seen Mary. Her labor was reconstructed in print by supporters and enemies. This kind of exposure had gendered cruelty. Male rulers were attacked through military failure, religion, sexuality, or alleged weakness. Queens were frequently attacked through fertility and sexual reputation. A woman's body offered propagandists a way to question both morality and succession. Mary's Catholicism intensified hostility. Anti-Catholic writing portrayed convents, priests, foreign queens, and secret rites as threats. Her Italian origin made her easier to cast as an outsider participating in a plot against English Protestant identity. The accusation used xenophobia, religious fear, and misogyny together. To say that does not require imagining all opponents as identical bigots. England had real constitutional conflicts and memories of persecution across confessional lines, but the form of the warming pan story drew power from prejudice. Mary paid the personal cost. When she fled London with the infant in December, she crossed the Thames under concealment and travelled toward the coast. The journey was cold, uncertain, and dangerous. A queen who had been watched by 70 people at birth now depended upon not being recognized. In France, she entered another royal court as an exile. Louis XIV treated James and Mary as king and queen. Saint-Germain housed a community of Jacobites, dependents, soldiers, clergy, and families displaced by political loyalty. The court recreated ceremony without a kingdom. Mary devoted herself to religion, family, and the Jacobite cause. She gave birth to another surviving child, Louisa Maria, in 1692. Louisa became beloved within the exiled family, but died of smallpox at 19. Mary outlived both James II and her daughter, dying in 1718. Her son lived until 1766. The baby, whose legitimacy was denied, grew old enough to become father and grandfather. His life stretched far beyond the crisis that named him. He married Maria Clementina Sobieska and had 2 sons, Charles Edward and Henry Benedict. The Jacobite claim continued through them. Charles became famous as Bonnie Prince Charlie. Henry became a cardinal. The dynasty James II hoped to establish survived biologically, but not politically. The warming pan accusation had helped remove it from Britain before the child could walk. Mary's later life also complicates the image of helplessness. She was not merely a victim in a bed. She navigated exile, patronage, religion, court relationships, and family strategy. Contemporaries described intelligence, dignity, and devotion. Compassion should not flatten her into suffering any more than propaganda flattened her into conspiracy. On the morning of the birth, however, her choices were narrow. The crowd had a clear function within the monarchy she inhabited. She could object to discomfort, but not cancel the political need for witness. Her husband's wig offered only a screen across her eyes. That reported gesture is worth considering carefully. It may have been polished in later retelling, and we should not treat every dramatic anecdote as a transcript. Yet it survives because it expresses the absurdity perfectly. The king cannot remove the men because he needs their testimony. He cannot give Mary privacy, so he hides them from her sight. The witnesses remain able to see. Only the queen is made unable to look back. Power moves in one direction. Her face is covered, not her body. The scene captures how royal modesty could protect appearance without protecting autonomy. Etiquette cared that the queen did not gaze upon men during an intimate act, while politics permitted those men to remain. Curtains, sheets, nightclothes, and attendants managed exposure, but they could not create true privacy. True privacy requires the right to exclude. Mary did not possess that right when succession was at stake. This is why the story feels more disturbing than an ordinary crowded hospital room. The number alone is not the issue. Consent is. A modern patient may choose several supporters and accept a medical team because each person serves care. An emergency can bring more staff without becoming spectacle. The patient's preferences remain part of ethical decision-making, even when safety imposes limits. Mary's audience served legitimacy first. Her safety was important because a dead queen would be a tragedy and political loss, but crowding was tolerated to protect the heir's claim. The state's evidence was created through her discomfort. Marie Antoinette's collapse made the bodily cost impossible to ignore. When she lost consciousness in 1778, the ceremonial audience had undermined the very birth it came to witness. Restricting later access acknowledged a boundary royal custom should have recognized sooner. Britain's ministerial witness offered another compromise. One official nearby could represent the state without filling the room. He did not need to see every physical detail. The authenticity of the process rested upon controlled access and immediate confirmation. Eventually, even that appeared unnecessary. Trust shifted from noble bodies to professional records. The witnesses moved into documents. Today, identity bands, signatures, timestamps, and registration perform silently what courtiers performed visibly. No system is perfect, but the burden no longer requires a queen to labor before a privy council. The journey is one of institutional maturity. When evidence becomes reliable outside the body can be allowed privacy. In 1688, reliable evidence still had a human face. The witnesses at St. James's were chosen partly because names carried authority. A lord of the Privy Council represented not merely himself but office, lineage, property, and political memory. A titled lady carried knowledge of the Queen's body and rank acceptable within court culture. A midwife carried experience. The Queen Dowager carried independent royal dignity. Together, they were intended to form an unimpeachable audience. But authority is never independent of context. A counselor appointed by James might fear displeasing him. A Catholic lady could be dismissed by Protestant critics. A servant depended upon the household. Even Catherine of Braganza was Catholic. The people most likely to receive chamber access were precisely those opponents considered compromised. The system contained a structural weakness. An ideal skeptical witness would be politically hostile yet personally trusted near the Queen. Such a person was difficult to find. Princess Anne might have served that role, but she was absent and already doubtful. Male opposition leaders could not be invited into months of intimate pregnancy observation. The Queen's right to modesty and the public's demand for independent proof pulled in opposite directions. No list of names could solve it completely. This is why royal households developed ceremony rather than absolute verification. Ceremony produces enough confidence for normal succession. It cannot defeat determined refusal. Most royal births did not generate a warming pan scandal. Observers accepted announcements because the political result was tolerable or trust remained intact. The same procedures that failed James worked quietly for other families. We notice the exceptional crisis and forget the countless babies whose legitimacy was never seriously challenged. The 1,688 birth became explosive because every surrounding condition was unstable. Religion divided the country. The king's policies alienated institutions. The child's sex altered succession. The timing accelerated conflict. Key skeptics were absent. Print carried rumor. Foreign intervention was already conceivable. The witness problem was a spark in a room filled with political vapor. Had the baby been a girl, the same crowd might have left with far less scandal. A daughter would not displace Mary and Anne in the same way. Opponents could wait for a Protestant future. The biology of sex determined the temperature of politics. No one in the room could control it. Early modern theories offered many supposed ways to influence whether a child was male or female. Diet, timing, body position, parental temperament, and astrological conditions entered advice. None could produce the certainty dynasties wanted. When a boy arrived, celebration began immediately. Guns, bells, bonfires, thanksgiving, and formal messages could announce a royal son. Courtiers dressed the news in language of providence. Supporters interpreted survival as divine favor. The child received titles connecting his tiny body to territories and futures he could not understand. When a girl arrived, joy was often tempered by disappointment. Marie Antoinette reportedly understood from the room's reaction in 1778 that she had borne a daughter. The emotional cruelty was built into succession. A healthy mother and infant could be overshadowed by sex. Queens knew before labor that the first question outside would be, boy or girl. Their safety came second in political conversation. Mary's answer was the one her husband wanted. That should have made the mourning triumphant. Instead, it made the birth intolerable to opponents. The infant's first journey through the palace, therefore, carried astonishing weight. Attendants cleaned away blood and fluid, tied and cut the cord, wrapped the body, and showed the sex to relevant witnesses. These intimate, practical acts became political authentication. Swaddling transformed the newborn into a recognizable courtly object. Bands and cloth held limbs close according to customary infant care. A cap covered the head. The wrapped child could be presented, carried, blessed, and placed in a cradle. Modern parents might find tight swaddling unfamiliar, though versions remain common when practiced safely. The royal baby then entered a household of nurses. A wet nurse might feed him, while dry nurses, rockers, laundresses, physicians, and servants managed daily care. The Queen's physical relationship with the child was shaped by court duties and custom. Some royal mothers resisted separation more than others. Every attendant expanded the circle of people who could observe health and identity. The warming pan theory required either their participation or their deception. As the child lived, conspiracy became more complex. A substitute baby had to be supplied at exactly the right time, carried through a crowded palace, accepted by the midwife and ladies, presented before officials, and maintained within a large household without credible confession. The number of required conspirators should weaken the theory. To believers, it strengthened the sense of hidden power. This is a common feature of conspiracy stories. Evidence of scale becomes evidence of capability. Silence proves fear. Denial proves coordination. Missing evidence proves successful concealment. The story becomes impossible to falsify. James's public hearing in October treated the accusation as falsifiable. He produced witnesses. He expected oath and rank to matter. His opponents had already moved into a different form of reasoning. The two sides no longer shared rules of proof. Political compromise became correspondingly difficult. The birth scandal did not only question an infant, it announced that the king's word, court, household, ministers, and printed declarations were all untrustworthy. Once that conclusion spread, invasion could be presented as rescue from a regime beyond lawful correction. The revolution that followed changed how legitimacy itself was understood. James defended hereditary divine right. William and Mary's accession relied upon parliamentary settlement, military success, religion, and a legal narrative of abdication. The Bill of Rights restricted the crown and condemned abuses. Later, succession law excluded Catholics. Birth still mattered, but Parliament asserted power over which births counted. James Francis Edward may have been biologically legitimate, yet statute and revolution removed him. The state solved disputed succession not by finding a better witness, but by changing the rule. This is another irony. 70 people proved the baby's origin. Politics made origin insufficient. The future crown would depend upon Protestant qualification as well as blood. Mary's body had been exposed to establish a claim the new settlement refused regardless. From her perspective, the sacrifice achieved nothing. From the perspective of royal ritual, it achieved the truth but not obedience. From the perspective of history, it left a uniquely detailed record. We should use that record with empathy. Witness depositions can tempt readers into voyeurism. They describe pain, position, clothing, bodily signs, and movement because skeptics demanded detail. Repeating every intimate phrase may recreate the intrusion rather than explain it. The essential fact is enough. Mary visibly labored and gave birth before many people. No credible warming pan substitution occurred. The scandal survived because political fear outweighed witness evidence. Everything else should help us understand the system, not stare at the Queen again. This ethical distance matters whenever private suffering becomes a source. Court records preserve lives because conflict forced people to expose them. A woman's body appears in history when lawyers questioned her. A servant's memory survives when a king required proof. The archive can repeat power unless we read carefully. Mary did not invite us into the chamber either. We enter only to understand why others insisted upon being there. That reason returns to hereditary rule. Imagine governing authority passing through birth without election, examination, or public choice. The newborn's identity must be secure because no later merit can repair uncertainty. A substituted infant would eventually command armies, appoint ministers, and inherit revenue solely because everyone believed he emerged from the correct body. Authentication at birth becomes constitutional infrastructure. Modern states verify elections through observers, ballots, records, and recounts. Hereditary states verified succession through beds, bodies, baptism, witnesses, and genealogy. The royal chamber was a polling station with only one possible voter. Biology. Witnesses certified the result. This comparison also shows the weakness. Biological events are messy, hurried, and private. They resist the transparent procedures expected of public legitimacy. Monarchy asked childbirth to behave like state paperwork. It never could. Blood, pain, uncertainty, and care do not follow court etiquette. The witness crowd tried to impose order anyway. Officials arrived in formal clothing. Ladies maintained rank. Messages used titles. The Gazette transformed labor into a precise sentence. Between 9 and 10, the Queen was safely delivered of a prince. The sentence is calm. The room was not. Official language removes cries, heat, fear, blood, and exhaustion. It presents an outcome suitable for public consumption. Mother safe, prince born, authorities present. That compression served the state. It can also serve sleep tonight, if we allow the noise behind it to fade. The morning has already happened. Mary survived. The child survived. The crowd eventually left. The political storm continued, but the physical labor ended. For a few hours after birth, even a royal chamber must turn toward rest. The first people to withdraw are those whose purpose ended with proof. Councillors move toward the door, carrying a fact they will repeat throughout London. Officers follow. Some speak excitedly about the prince. Others understand that celebration will be controversial. Shoes cross the floor in uneven groups rather than one organized procession. The room does not empty at once. Rank determines movement. A person near the door must make space for someone more important. Servants carry messages around the departing witnesses. Fresh air enters whenever the door opens, then disappears beneath the heat of the chamber. Mary remains where she has labored. Her attendants now try to restore a kind of privacy. Linen is changed. The bed is arranged. Water is brought. The midwife watches bleeding and the delivery of the placenta, because danger has not ended with the baby's first cry. Postpartum hemorrhage can begin quickly. Infection will remain a threat for days. The official announcement that the Queen is safely delivered expresses hope more than certainty. Early modern families knew that mothers could worsen after appearing well. Royal physicians watched pulse, fever, pain, appetite, and sleep with tools too limited to prevent every complication. For the moment, Mary is alive and conscious. The child is elsewhere in the suite being washed and wrapped, surrounded by another group. His sex has been confirmed. Witnesses watch his route because the space between mother and cradle is politically exposed. James moves between roles. He is husband, father, king, and director of evidence. His satisfaction at a son exists beside awareness of rumor. He wants the infant shown, the right people notified, and every stage remembered. Perhaps he believes the crowd has solved the problem. Perhaps he already knows it has not. Outside the palace, news travels faster than careful detail. A servant tells a guard. A messenger tells an official household. Bells tell the city without explaining. Printed notice follows. By midday, people who were nowhere near St. James's speak confidently about what happened inside. Some say the Queen has delivered a prince by God's mercy. Some say the timing is suspicious. Some say the baby is large or small, early or late, healthy or weak. Some repeat the pan. The first version a listener hears may become the one that feels true. Within the chamber, those stories are distant. The immediate world has narrowed to cloth, water, breath, and pain after pain. A woman who has been a symbol for months is now simply exhausted. The king's wig no longer covers her view. The men have mostly gone. Trusted women remain. They lower voices. One adjusts a pillow. Another checks the fire. A cup reaches Mary's hand. The air still carries too many people, but it begins to cool. The Queen asks about the baby. She has lost so many children that survival cannot feel secure. A living cry now does not promise another morning. She needs reassurance beyond politics. Is he breathing well? Is he warm? Has he fed? The answers come through attendants. The infant is brought near when custom and care allow. Wrapped tightly, His face is the only small area of skin visible. He has no knowledge of succession, religion, pan, or witness. He reacts to temperature, hunger, pressure, sound, and touch. The body that has caused a national crisis is utterly dependent. This is another contradiction at the heart of hereditary monarchy. An infant holds enormous symbolic power and no practical power at all. Adults compete around him. Nurses keep him alive. His name appears in documents before he can focus his eyes. At baptism, sacred ritual will confirm entry into Christian and dynastic community. Sponsors, clergy, names, and titles will extend the witness chain. Public celebration will attempt to make his place ordinary. For tonight, he sleeps. Newborn sleep is not the long silence adults expect. It arrives in brief stretches between feeding, crying, changing, and comfort. Nurses watch continuously. A royal nursery has more attendants than an ordinary home, but no amount of rank teaches a baby to respect palace hours. The prince wakes. Someone lifts him. The court waits upon a person who cannot wait. Mary's body also follows its own schedule. Rest comes in fragments. Pain continues. Milk, bleeding, temperature, and exhaustion cannot be ordered by decree. The queen may receive carefully chosen food and drink, yet recovery depends upon processes no courtier can accelerate. The palace adapts around mother and child. Access is controlled more tightly now. Those who need no longer be present are excluded. Ironically, privacy becomes possible only after the politically decisive exposure. The door, guarded against a substitute, can now guard against interruption. In adjoining rooms, people write. Letters describe the prince. Ambassadors prepare dispatches for foreign courts. Supporters choose providential language. Opponents search for inconsistencies. Ink fixes competing births on paper. There is the birth Mary experienced. There is the birth witnesses recorded. There is the birth the Gazette announced. There is the birth pamphleteers invented. Only one child lies in the cradle. History will spend centuries separating him from the stories. The task becomes easier when we look at motive and evidence calmly. Mary had a genuine pregnancy observed by attendants. She gave birth before an unusually large number of witnesses. 42 people later provided formal testimony. No reliable witness established a substitution. The warming pan versions were inconsistent and politically useful. The child's later life offered no credible reason to doubt his parentage. The reasonable conclusion is clear. The scandal tells us about fear, not fraud. It tells us that James had lost the trust required for monarchy. It tells us how anti-Catholic politics could transform a queen's body into conspiracy. It tells us that public exposure does not guarantee public belief. And it tells us why royal birth witnesses existed in the first place. They existed because hereditary rule makes maternity a constitutional fact. The Queen could not own that fact privately. Even when the system worked, it placed a burden upon her dignity. When it failed, she suffered the burden without receiving protection. Marie Antoinette's later experience demonstrates the same imbalance physically. A crowd that came to secure legitimacy nearly suffocated the mother. The court reduced access afterward because no proof was valuable enough to kill the queen providing it. Britain's later use of one Home Secretary demonstrates institutional learning. Representation could replace mass presence. A minister could certify continuity without inspecting the most intimate moment. Finally, medical and civil records made the minister unnecessary. The witness became a signature. The crowd became an announcement. The state stepped outside the room. Today, when a royal baby is born in Britain, official channels release time, weight, sex, and the condition of mother and child. Family members are informed. A notice may be displayed. Bells, salutes, and news coverage preserve public celebration. But no Privy Council gathers around the bed. The continuity of monarchy is announced without replaying 1688. That difference may seem obvious until we remember how long the older custom survived. The final ministerial attendance in 1936 occurred within the lifetime of people alive in the 21st century. Royal birth witness was not purely medieval. It reached the age of radio, automobiles, and modern government. Custom survives because the risk it addresses feels too serious to ignore. What if a child were substituted? What if enemies challenged legitimacy? What if the line of succession were false? Each generation kept one official nearby because ending the practice required confidence that other systems were stronger. Eventually, they were. The change also reflected a different understanding of the royal family. Public interest remained intense, but personal privacy gained moral weight. A royal mother could be a constitutional figure without surrendering every physical boundary. That boundary is still negotiated. Media speculation follows pregnancies. Crowds wait outside hospitals. Cameras seek the first appearance. Commentators analyze names, clothing, and family relationships. The public chamber has moved outdoors, but curiosity still presses toward the door. Modern technology can magnify attention beyond anything Mary experienced. Millions may see an infant's photograph within minutes. Yet the mother can give birth before people she chooses, rather than 70 political witnesses. Visibility after the event has replaced visibility during it. This is a meaningful improvement. It recognizes that authentication does not require humiliation. The lesson applies beyond royalty. Institutions often demand personal exposure to prove identity, illness, suffering, or eligibility. Good systems ask only what is necessary and protect dignity while verifying facts. St. James's Palace shows what happens when proof expands without restraint. The crowd becomes a burden, and still, the burden may not persuade. Return to the room once more after most witnesses have gone. The floor bears signs of hurried movement. A chair stands out of place. Cloths have been gathered. The bed warmer that will become infamous may rest innocently near a wall, empty, ordinary, and unaware of its future career in propaganda. Look at it without the cartoon. It is a practical object made of metal and wood. Its pierced or patterned cover once allowed warmth to pass while containing coals. A servant moved it between sheets before removing it. It was designed for comfort in a cold palace. Political imagination changed its function. In prints, it carried an heir. In memory, it carried a revolution. In reality, it warmed a bed. Objects do not create scandals. People assign them stories. The pan became powerful because it made concealment visible. A secret baby needed a container. Once artists supplied one, the accusation could be held in the mind. The real evidence had no object so perfect. Perhaps the closest was Mary herself, but treating her body as evidence had already caused the problem. The witnesses could describe what they saw. They could not package truth into a symbol as memorable as the lie. History can correct that imbalance slowly. It can repeat the facts without repeating humiliation. It can name the political context. It can show why the lie succeeded while refusing to treat success as plausibility. Then the warming pan returns to the wall. The baby returns to the cradle. Mary returns to the bed as a recovering mother rather than a conspirator. And the 70 people return to what they truly were: an excessive human attempt to make succession certain. They did witness a real birth. They could not witness the future. Within 6 months, the family would be in exile. Within a year, William and Mary would wear the crowns. Within decades, law would settle succession along Protestant lines. The infant's first morning promised one history and produced another. No one beside the bed could see that change arriving. Their sight extended only across the room. Beyond the walls, events were already moving. For now, we do not need to follow them. The invasion has been explained. The rumor has been separated from fact. The witnesses have given their statements. The chamber can become smaller again. Not a kingdom, not a constitution, only a quiet room after a difficult birth. The palace beyond it continues to celebrate. From a distant courtyard comes the sound of a bell. It repeats the news without words. Anyone hearing it knows something important has occurred, though not every listener yet knows whether the child is a prince or princess. A messenger crosses the courtyard with the answer. His steps are quick. The sound fades beneath stone arches. Inside Mary's suite, speed is no longer helpful. Recovery cannot be hurried. Attendants move carefully to avoid waking her. A basin is carried with both hands. A cloth is folded rather than dropped. Conversation becomes gesture whenever possible. The people who remain have practical reasons. One watches the queen, one watches the child, one manages the door, one prepares what will be needed next. The great officers have carried legitimacy away with them. Care stays behind. This separation tells us which witnesses mattered after the announcement. A counselor could swear an oath months later, but he could not feed the infant. A lord could recognize a prince, but he could not make the queen's fever fall. The political audience was powerful only at the moment of proof. The quieter household sustained life. Their names appear less prominently. That is common in royal history. Ceremony records those with rank. Survival depends upon those with tasks. A wet nurse settles into position. The newborn turns toward warmth and food by reflex. Feeding may be difficult at first. Attendants observe and adjust. The child's ability to suck becomes another small sign of hope after so many losses. Mary hears the cry and knows he is alive. For now, that sound matters more than the bells. The room gradually changes from birth chamber to lying-in chamber. Evidence is cleared. Fresh linen replaces used. Light is softened. The arrangement of objects now serves rest rather than labor. Not everything can be cleaned immediately. The air holds memory. So does the body. Mary closes her eyes, but the crowded faces may remain behind them, men standing where women usually stood. officials trying not to show discomfort, ladies watching one another as well as the Queen. James's wig across her face. Perhaps exhaustion removes every image. Sleep after labor can arrive with unusual force and still break quickly. Pain wakes, a voice wakes, fear for the baby wakes. The body rests in fragments because birth has rearranged it. The palace keeps time outside. Meals are served. Guards change. Clerks write. Visitors arrive hoping for news. Mary's time is measured in minutes between care. At some point, the summer light shifts across the room. Curtains that once restricted view now protect her from brightness. Dust moves through one narrow beam. The visual world becomes ordinary again. No substitute baby enters. No conspirator opens a hidden panel. No warming pan carries anything except the story later placed inside it. The absence of drama is the truth. Hours pass. The prince remains the same infant. Witness continuity becomes simpler with every hour, because nurses, ladies, and servants see him repeatedly. Yet the rumor outside grows at the same time. Reality rests while fiction travels. This difference in speed is worth remembering. Care is slow. Proof is detailed. Rumor is fast. A mother recovers one breath at a time. A pamphlet can accuse her in a sentence. The state answered with 42 statements because truth had to reconstruct a chain rumor could erase in one image. We have now reconstructed enough of that chain. We know why officials came. We know who Mary was. We know what the child changed. We know where the warming pan entered the story. We know why the witness hearing failed politically. And we know how royal birth customs later narrowed from crowds to one minister and then disappeared. The title asks why 70 strangers watched a queen give birth. The shortest answer is that hereditary monarchy could not risk a disputed heir. The fuller answer is that James's Catholic son transformed the future of kingdoms at a moment when trust in the king was collapsing. The court used a large audience to certify maternity, sex, and continuity. Most observers were not random strangers, and not all had an equal view of the physical delivery, but their collective presence was deliberately public and deeply intrusive. They were supposed to prevent a substitution story. Instead, their testimony became part of a political battle the monarchy had already lost. The number 70 reveals desperation. A confident system would need fewer. A trusted system might need none. James gathered as many authoritative bodies as the sudden labor allowed, because he sensed that ordinary royal announcement would not be believed. The crowd was a measure of weakness, disguised as ceremony. Mary bore the cost of that weakness. This may be the most important fact to carry from the room. When institutions lose trust, they often demand more visible proof from individuals. The individual is exposed, examined, and required to perform certainty. Yet no amount of exposure repairs distrust created elsewhere. Mary could not solve James's political crisis by giving birth publicly. Her body was asked to prove too much. It proved only what a body could prove. She had a son. The rest belonged to politics. Once those two domains are separated, the scandal becomes clearer. Biological legitimacy was genuine. Political legitimacy was contested. The warming pan confused them on purpose. Opponents attacked the first in order to weaken the second. The Glorious Revolution then replaced both with a new settlement grounded in Protestant succession and parliamentary authority. The infant lived, but his path to the throne closed. Mary left, but her testimony did not change. The witnesses scattered, but their names remained on paper. The pan survived as a joke. Centuries later, the joke still needs correction. We can make that correction gently. No need to summon the court again. No need to crowd the chamber with our own curiosity. We can stand farther back, in the antechamber, where the details are enough and the Queen retains what privacy history can return. From there, the bed is partly concealed. Attendants pass through the doorway when needed. Their expressions tell us that mother and child are safe for the moment. That is all we require. The counselors have left behind a faint disturbance in the palace. Conversations, boots, paper, and the self-importance of people who believe they have secured the future. They have secured only a record. But the record is useful. It allows us to reject the substitution story with confidence. It gives Mary something propaganda tried to take away: recognition as the mother of her own child. Historical correction can be a form of restored dignity. The prince does not need to be considered rightful king for his birth to be real. One can support the constitutional outcome of 1688 without accepting a lie about a woman's labor. Political judgment and factual honesty do not need to share a faction. The same principle helps with many historical scandals. A false accusation does not become true because its target had other faults. A genuine grievance does not make every piece of propaganda accurate. The past deserves distinctions its participants often refused. Mary was a Catholic queen in a divided country. James pursued policies that cost him support. William invaded with strategic motives. Parliament reshaped monarchy. And a real baby was born at St. James's Palace on the 10th of June. All can be true together. The room no longer needs to hold contradiction as noise. It can hold it as understanding. Outside, evening approaches. The summer day has been long. News has traveled beyond London toward ports, estates, churches, and foreign embassies. Riders carry letters along roads. Ships will carry reports across water. Some recipients will celebrate. Others will begin planning. The palace windows catch the last light. Within the lying-in room, lamps are prepared before darkness. Curtains close more fully. The day's heat begins to leave stone walls. Mary has slept a little. The baby has fed. For this one evening, the feared Catholic dynasty consists of a tired mother and a swaddled child. Armies have not yet sailed. The invitation to William has not yet become an invasion. The Privy Council hearing has not yet assembled. The pamphlets have not yet multiplied. History has consequences waiting, but they do not enter the room tonight. The future remains outside with the last courtiers. Inside, a nurse walks slowly with the prince. Her movement is steady and repetitive. One step, a pause, another step. The floor has been crossed by hurried officials all morning. Now it receives only the quiet pacing used to settle a child. The prince's eyes close. He does not know that people will argue about the moment he opened them. He does not know that he will grow up in France, attempt a crown, marry, have sons, and die in Rome far from the palace where he was born. The nurse does not need to know either. Her work belongs to the present. Warmth, breath, support. The essential things are small. At the bedside, another attendant watches Mary's face for fever or distress. The Queen's pulse has slowed. Her breathing is more even. The danger has not vanished, but the room no longer moves around crisis. A fire settles. Metal near the hearth catches a dull reflection. Perhaps the warming pan stands there. Perhaps another bed warmer was used. Or perhaps the famous object existed mainly in accusation. Its exact physical presence no longer matters. Let it remain empty. Let its handle cool. Let it become only household equipment. The story placed inside it has been removed. Without the imagined baby, the pan loses political power. It returns to brass or copper, pierced lid, wooden handle, and fading heat. An ordinary object at the edge of an extraordinary room. The witnesses also lose political power when they sleep. One counselor returns home and repeats what he saw to family. Another writes a note. A lady removes formal clothing and reflects upon the Queen's endurance. A servant falls asleep without recording anything. They will remember differently. In October, questions will shape those memories. But tonight, they are simply impressions from a crowded morning. The most reliable fact is shared across them. A prince was born. The rest of their detail overlaps enough to form the chain James wanted. We can close the depositions now. Paper makes a soft sound when folded. Ink has dried. The 42 formal voices no longer need to defend themselves against the pamphlets. Modern evidence has judged the story. Mary's motherhood is not in doubt. 70 people can leave, one by one. Imagine them walking backward through the palace passages. The highest officers first, then courtiers, attendants whose duties are complete, messengers, and curious figures who had pressed near the event because access meant status. The suite grows larger as bodies disappear. Air moves. Sound softens. Doors close between rooms. At last, only those chosen for care remain. This is the chamber Mary should have had sooner. Not empty, not lonely, simply protected. The distinction is gentle. Childbirth has rarely been solitary, nor should safety require isolation. Privacy is not the absence of help. It is the presence of the right people for the right reasons. The midwife belongs. The nurse belongs. The trusted attendant belongs. The counselor waiting for political proof does not need to stand so close. Centuries of change moved him farther away until he disappeared from the birth altogether. That movement may be the quiet conclusion of our story. The state stepped back. The door gained meaning. The mother became more than evidence. Royal babies continued to be announced, celebrated, and entered into succession, but the moment of birth returned to care. If we listen to the modern announcement, we hear an echo of the Gazette. Time, place, sex. Condition of mother and child. The same facts travel. Stripped of the crowd, what once required 70 bodies now requires a trusted message. That is what institutions can achieve when people believe their records. The palace night grows deeper. London beyond St. James's settles unevenly. Tavern voices continue. Watchmen move. The river carries reflected light. Printing presses may already prepare news, though the most poisonous versions will take time to form. Mary cannot hear the whole city. Thick walls reduce it to a distant murmur. The child makes a smaller sound beside her. The queen wakes enough to ask after him. An attendant answers quietly. He is safe. For this moment, the answer is true and complete. No title needs to be added. No oath needs to be sworn. No witness needs to sign. A mother has asked about her child. The room can rest around that simple fact. The simplicity is something royal ceremony repeatedly obscured. It surrounded birth with titles before allowing relationship. The infant was prince before he was James, heir before he was son, Catholic danger before he was a person. Mary was queen and vessel of succession before she was a woman recovering from labor. History can reverse the order for a moment. Woman, mother, child, then queen and prince. Seen in that order, the crowd looks different. It is no longer the natural audience of monarchy. It is an institution entering a family event because power depends upon it. This does not make the witnesses cruel as individuals. Many probably felt sympathy. Some may have been embarrassed by their role. Others understood presence as duty rather than privilege. Titled, "Women who had experienced childbirth knew the danger." Men standing awkwardly near the chamber may have wished themselves elsewhere. Systems can intrude through people who mean no harm. Each person says, "My presence is required." 70 requirements become an audience. The system's logic distributes responsibility until no one feels able to leave first. Perhaps this is how the room grew so full. One counselor could not authenticate enough. One lady might be accused of loyalty. One midwife lacked political rank. Add another, then another, until the quantity of testimony seemed stronger than the quality of trust. The lesson is not that witnesses are useless. Witnesses protect truth every day. They validate wills, marriages, contracts, elections, experiments, and legal statements. Independent observation restrains fraud. The lesson is that witness must be proportionate and credible. Mary's chamber had quantity without public confidence. The official hearing had evidence without shared authority. The rumor had no evidence but perfect emotional timing. That combination made the warming pan stronger than 70 respectable names. We have given those names their proper weight again. They establish the birth. They do not make James a good king. They do not determine whether William's revolution was justified. They do not decide the later Jacobite claim. They establish one bounded fact, and bounded facts are enough. Mary gave birth to James Francis Edward Stuart. The child was not carried into the room inside a bed warmer. Once that boundary is secure, interpretation can continue honestly. The remaining political questions belong beyond the chamber. We can leave them there. In the room, the lamp is lower now. Its light reaches the bed, but not the far corners. Wood paneling and hanging fabric absorb brightness. Objects that seemed sharply visible during the busy morning have softened into outline. The cradle is close. An attendant sits beside it, awake but still. Her hands rest in her lap. She has learned to notice small changes in breathing without staring. Every so often, she adjusts the cloth near the child's shoulder. Mary sleeps. No one asks her to perform. No one asks whether the child is real. No one asks the bed to become a court. The palace has taken back its corridors and offices. The chamber belongs temporarily to recovery. Outside its guarded door, a servant sits on a stool. He hears footsteps approaching and identifies them before they arrive. Access is denied or permitted according to instruction. The same boundary that failed to protect Mary from witnesses now protects her from celebration. The servant's quiet refusal creates privacy. Not now. The Queen is resting. Even power must wait. The words travel down the passage, and footsteps retreat. This is how a great palace becomes calm, not through complete silence, but through layers of distance. A door reduces voices. A turn in the passage removes lamplight. A stair carries movement to another floor. Courtyards separate one household rhythm from another. At the center of those layers, mother and child remain. The 70 witnesses are scattered across London. 42 depositions are months away. The Dutch fleet is only a possibility. The warming pan has not yet become an icon. Time has not hardened this morning into history. There is still room for ordinary tenderness. Perhaps Mary wakes and sees the infant herself. Perhaps an attendant brings him closer. No crowd follows. The Queen looks without needing anyone to verify that she looks. The baby's face changes through tiny movements. Brow tightens. Mouth opens. One hand escapes cloth, fingers closing around nothing. These details cannot be used in a constitutional argument. That is what makes them private. They matter only to the people present. The most human moments leave the weakest archive. No clock writes that Mary watched the child breathe. No gazette records the weight of relief after earlier losses. No counselor testifies to the silence after everyone left. We can infer without claiming certainty. A long-awaited living child brings emotion beyond ceremony. The room would have held it. Then the child settles again. Mary's eyes close. The attendant returns him to safe warmth. Nothing more needs to happen before morning. Our own place in the palace has also reached its end. We came to ask why a queen gave birth before 70 people. We found a monarchy trying to secure biological succession through human witness. We found a Catholic king who had lost political trust, a queen whose healthy son changed the expected future, and an opposition prepared to convert an ordinary bedwarmer into proof of conspiracy. We found that more than 70 people attended the birth, while 42 later gave formal testimony. We found that the testimony was strong and the rumor false. We found that truth could still lose political power. We followed the custom forward to Marie Antoinette's dangerously overcrowded chamber, then to the single British minister waiting nearby, and finally to modern privacy supported by records rather than spectators. The answer is complete. No hidden infant remains inside the pan. No unexplained figure remains behind the door. The number 70 no longer floats as a shocking curiosity. It belongs to a system, a crisis, and one specific morning. It also belongs to a long history of people trying to make inheritance visible. Before written registration, communities relied upon memory. Neighbors knew who had been pregnant. Midwives knew which children they delivered. Priests recorded baptisms where registers existed. Families preserved names and dates in Bibles, letters, legal papers, and spoken genealogy. Royal households added layers because error carried greater consequences. They controlled access to the pregnant queen. They prepared the chamber. They summoned rank. They displayed the newborn. They baptized quickly when danger threatened. They published the result. Each stage answered a different possible challenge. Was the queen truly pregnant? Did she truly labor? Was the child alive? Was it male or female? Did the same infant pass from chamber to nursery? Was the child baptized and named? Could recognized authorities testify? The 70 observers did not all answer every question. Together, they formed overlapping coverage. Modern security systems use the same general principle through independent records, cameras, identification bands, signatures, and controlled handovers. The difference is that technology and procedure can now watch the process without turning childbirth into public theater. That difference took centuries to achieve. It required more than medical progress. It required governments to accept evidence produced by professionals rather than embodied by noble rank. It required public trust in registration. It required a growing belief that even a royal woman possessed a private self distinct from the dynasty. The end of official witness was therefore not simply the removal of an old-fashioned man from a corridor. It marked a shift in where legitimacy lived. Once, legitimacy lived in what respected people said they had seen. Now it lived in institutions, records, and law. And law itself had already changed the monarchy. Since 1688, Parliament had shaped succession explicitly. A baby's birth remained important, but no infant entered an unchecked divine inheritance merely through blood. Mary's crowded chamber stands at the boundary between older and newer sources of authority. James relied upon hereditary right and personal witness. His opponents relied upon religion, political mobilization, print, military intervention, and parliamentary settlement. The child was genuine. The political world around him was changing faster than birth ceremony could contain. That may be why the scene feels both ancient and modern. The bed, warming pan, midwife, and courtiers belong to an older court. The propaganda battle, competing publications, institutional distrust, and viral false image feel entirely familiar. A visual claim outruns a document. People choose evidence through identity. Correction arrives after belief has settled. The technology differs. The human difficulty remains. Knowing this, we can leave the scandal with a little more patience for proof and a little less fascination with accusation. The least dramatic explanation is often the strongest when supported by ordinary continuity and many independent memories. A queen labored. A baby was born. Politics refused to accept what the room had seen. The witnesses could not force belief, but their presence still matters. Without them, the false story might appear plausible from a distance. Because they recorded what happened, we can distinguish the Queen's experience from the accusation imposed upon it. Their evidence did not preserve a throne. It preserved a fact. Sometimes that is the quieter work of history. It cannot undo exile, return privacy, or silence every pamphlet. It can only place the true event back where invention displaced it. Mary's son needs no imagined journey through hot coals. His real journey from a crowded birth chamber to a cradle, then from England into lifelong exile, is strange and consequential enough. It belongs to evidence now, not rumor, and the distinction can remain secure even as the palace settles into darkness. You can let it remain there. St. James's Palace still stands in London, though rooms and uses have changed across centuries. The people of 1688 would not recognize every detail of the city outside. They would recognize guarded access, official announcement, family hope, and political argument. They might be surprised that royal mothers now give birth without ministers watching. Mary might not be surprised at all. Perhaps she would simply understand the value of an empty doorway. Imagine giving it to her now. The last unnecessary witness rises. He crosses the antechamber. He closes the outer door quietly behind him. The guard remains, but turns his attention down the passage. The chamber is no longer exposed. Warm light stays within. Cooler darkness fills the corridor. We can walk away with the others, though more gently and much later than they did. At the turn of the stair, the Queen's door disappears from view. Below, palace rooms are nearly dark. A clerk's candle still burns over one unfinished page, but the pen has stopped. Tomorrow will bring announcements, arguments, and plans. Tonight, ink can wait. Cross the courtyard. The bell is silent now. Stone holds the day's remaining warmth. Above the roofline, the sky is clear enough for a few stars. London lies beyond the gates, full of stories, most of them asleep. The warming pan rumor is among them. Let it sleep without waking again. The facts are safe. The mother is resting. The child is breathing. The witnesses have gone. And the room that once held a kingdom has become, at last, only a room. Good night.